He thought his money could buy him a moment of cruel fun. He never imagined he was challenging a forgotten prodigy. He thought he was putting a spotlight on her shame, but he was really just handing her a stage to reclaim her entire world. What happens when an ordinary person, pushed to the edge and buried under the weight of a difficult life, shows the world something extraordinary? What happens when the quietest person in the room is forced to make the loudest statement? Intro. It all started with a sneer and a challenge. An arrogant millionaire looks at a waitress and says, "I dare you to dance. $10,000 if you don't make a fool of yourself." In front of a laughing crowd, the waitress stands frozen, her face a mask of fear and resolve. The gilded cage. The air in the Grand Atoria ballroom was thick with the scent of money and lilies, a suffocating perfume. For the guests, it was the smell of a Tuesday night. For Cassie, a waitress just trying to survive her shift, it was a world she served but could never be a part of. Cassie moved between the tables with a practiced invisibility. Her shoes, a pair of clunky, black orthopedic ones she'd bought with her last paycheck, made no sound on the plush carpet. They were a sensible contrast to the glitter surrounding her, the flash of diamonds, the glint of gold watches, and the brittle laughter that bounced off the crystal chandeliers. She wasn't just tired from a 10-hour double shift, she was soul-crushingly weary. For 3 years, every smile she offered was a performance. She was a ghost in a starched black uniform, her presence required but her existence ignored. Her thoughts, as always, drifted to her younger sister, Maya. Maya was Cassie's entire world, born with a spirit that could move mountains but a body that struggled to move at all. The doctors used long, complicated words, but it all boiled down to this. Maya's muscles were in constant rebellion. A new experimental therapy was their last, best hope. It was also astronomically expensive, a figure so large it felt less like a number and more like a wall. So Cassie worked. She worked until her feet swelled and her back screamed, enduring condescending glances and the casual cruelty of people for whom $1,000 was a tip, not a lifeline. She'd once been a different person, a girl whose feet didn't ache but flew. A girl accepted into the Juilliard dance program with a full scholarship. But then her mother passed, leaving Cassie as Maya's sole guardian. That dream faded into a painful memory. Now, her world was this gilded cage, serving people who had everything. Tonight, the cage felt particularly small. At her most prominent table sat Preston Montgomery III, heir to a mythological real estate fortune. He was handsome in that way only generations of wealth can sculpt a person, with a casual posture that screamed boredom and entitlement. He was flanked by his usual court, 2 vapid men named Chad and Bryce, and a woman named Veronica whose laugh sounded like breaking glass. They were famously difficult, sending back wine for being insufficiently chilled, and speaking to the staff like they were furniture. Cassie's manager, Mrs. Peterson, had warned her. "Just keep your head down, Cassie," she'd whispered. "Smile, nod, and get through it." Cassie had been doing just that, refilling their water with painstaking precision and absorbing their thinly veiled insults. They spoke about her as if she weren't there. "Honestly, the service here has gone downhill," Veronica said, staring right at Cassie. "You'd think for what they charge, they could hire people with a bit more spark." Chad snickered. "Spark costs extra, Veronica. Didn't you get the memo?" Preston hadn't even looked up from his phone. He radiated a profound disinterest that was more insulting than any comment. To him, she was no different from the chair she stood beside, a functional object, devoid of thought, feeling, or a past. Cassie's jaw tightened, but she kept a polite, vacant smile fixed on her face. She thought of Maya's therapy bills and the eviction notice on their apartment door. That smile was her armor. She just had to get through the next few hours. Section 2, The Unraveling. It started with something small. As Cassie reached to refill Preston's water, a clumsy gesture from Chad jostled her arm. A single drop of ice-cold water, no bigger than a teardrop, landed on the back of Preston Montgomery's hand. The table went silent. Preston slowly lifted his head. His gaze was cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of warmth. He looked at the drop of water as if it were poison. Then, he lifted his eyes and finally, truly, looked at Cassie. It wasn't anger. It was a theatrical offense, the look a king might give a peasant who dared to breathe his air. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. I am so sorry, sir," Cassie stammered, her heart hammering. "It was an accident." "An accident," Preston repeated. He dabbed the water with the dramatic flourish of a surgeon. "You see, this is precisely what I'm talking about. A lack of precision. A lack of care." He leaned back, a cruel smirk forming on his lips. He had found a new toy. Nearby tables quieted, sensing a spectacle was about to begin. "You know," Preston said, his voice growing louder for his new audience, "the core problem here is a lack of grace. People who do this kind of work," he waved a dismissive hand, "they just shuttle things around. There's no art to it. No poise." Cassie stood frozen, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on her. She wanted to disappear. "I have a theory," Preston continued, now a performer on his stage. "True grace is innate. You either have it, or you don't. And people who don't have it, well, they end up serving people who do." He let the insult hang in the air. Then, his eyes lit up with a malicious idea. "I have a proposition," he announced, looking directly at Cassie. "You look like you have 2 left feet. Your shoes certainly suggest as much." A wave of quiet laughter rippled through the room. "But maybe underneath that drab uniform beats the heart of a dancer," he said with mock generosity. He snapped his fingers at the string quartet. "Maestro. Do you know a tango?" The startled violinist nodded slowly. "Excellent," Preston beamed. He pulled out a platinum money clip overflowing with cash and fanned out a thick stack of bills. $10,000, he announced to the silent room. "Your tip. If you can dance this tango with me and not make a complete fool of yourself. But if you stumble, you get nothing. And you're fired." He shot a look at Mrs. Peterson, who was now rushing toward them, her face pale with horror. "I'll personally see to it." It was the ultimate public humiliation, a spectacle designed for her to fail. But then Cassie looked at his smug, certain face and saw every person who had ever dismissed her. She thought of Maya. She thought of the mountain of bills. $10,000 wasn't just an insult, it was a new wheelchair. It was 6 months of therapy. It was a lifeline, thrown by the very man who wanted to watch her drown. But it wasn't just the money. A tiny ember of defiance she thought had died long ago began to glow. She took a slow, deliberate breath. The air no longer felt suffocating, it felt electric. She methodically unbuttoned her waitress uniform, revealing a simple black tank top underneath. She folded the uniform neatly and placed it on a trolley. Then, she bent down, unstrapped her clunky shoes, and kicked them aside. The feel of the carpet beneath her bare feet was grounding. She stood up straight, and for the first time that night, she dropped the polite smile. She met Preston's gaze, her expression one of pure, unadulterated focus. She looked at the stunned musicians and gave them a single, sharp nod. The first notes of the tango, La Comparsita, filled the ballroom. Preston strode toward her, grabbing her hand and pulling her roughly into a tango frame. His posture was stiff, academic, the style of someone who memorizes steps but doesn't feel the music. He intended to lead, to dominate, to steer her into clumsy mistakes. He launched into a basic forward ocho, and for the first 2 steps, she let him. She followed his rigid, arrogant lead, and he smirked at his friends. This was going to be easy. And then, everything changed. On the 3rd step, Cassie didn't just follow, she responded. She absorbed his clumsy lead and transformed it, her body becoming fluid and alive. She redirected his momentum into a flawless, swirling turn. Preston's smirk faltered. He tried to pull her back, but it was like trying to catch smoke with a net. She was no longer his partner, he was her prop. With a powerful, graceful movement, she broke his frame, spinning away only to snap back with the precision of a striking snake. Her feet, which he had mocked, were a blur, executing complex ganchos and boleos with breathtaking speed. She wasn't just dancing, she was telling the music story of passion, conflict, and heartbreak. The room, once buzzing with whispers, fell into a profound, reverent silence. Jaws literally dropped. All eyes were on the waitress who had transformed before them. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of grace and fire. This wasn't a performance for $10,000. This was a reclamation of every dream she had sacrificed. Preston was completely lost, stumbling to keep up, his face a mask of disbelief and panic. He had started this dance to humiliate her, but he was the one being exposed. His expensive lessons were nothing compared to her raw, untamed talent. She was the matador, and he was the stunned, bewildered bull. As the music swelled to its crescendo, she moved in close. For a moment, their faces were inches apart, and he saw not anger in her eyes, but an immense, powerful pity. In that moment, he felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. With a final, explosive flourish, she executed a dramatic dip, supporting his weight with impossible strength. The final chord of the tango hung in the air. After a long second of silence, one person began to clap. Then another, and another, until the entire room erupted in a thunderous standing ovation. The applause wasn't just for the dance, it was for the triumph of dignity over arrogance. The roar of the crowd was a judgment against Preston. His face, mottled red during the dance, deepened to a furious crimson. He had been made a fool of. And he had been bested by a servant. Cassie slowly rose, her chest heaving. She ignored the applause, her eyes fixed on Preston. He lurched forward, his eyes now filled with pure hatred. He ripped the stack of $10,000 from his money clip. He didn't offer it. He threw it. The $100 bills fluttered down and landed in a messy, insulting pile at Cassie's bare feet. There, he spat. You did your little trick. Take your money and get out. The applause died. Cassie looked down at the scattered bills. She thought of Maya, of the hope this money represented. She had earned it. No one would blame her. But then she looked up at Preston's face and saw no remorse, only the bitter fury of a spoiled child who had lost a game. To take that money would mean that her pride, her talent, her very soul had a price tag. With a calmness that stunned even herself, she looked Preston in the eye. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a scalpel. I think you misunderstand, she said clearly. I didn't dance for your money. I danced for me. She took a small step back from the scattered bills. My art is not for sale. She held his gaze for one more beat. Then, without another glance at the money, she turned her back on him. Head held high, she walked off the dance floor, picked up her folded uniform and her clunky shoes, and moved toward the exit with the unassailable dignity of a queen. As she reached the door, a new voice cut through the silence. Young lady, wait. Cassie turned. Standing near table 7 was an older man who looked remarkably like Preston, but where the son's eyes held arrogance, the father's held a weary wisdom. It was Preston Montgomery Jr., the patriarch who had built the empire. He had witnessed the entire, shameful episode. He walked over to his son, his expression grim. You are a disgrace to this family's name, he said in a low rumble. He then turned to the room. My deepest apologies for my son's disgusting behavior. He looked at Cassie, his eyes softening with genuine respect. What you did, he said, took more courage and character than I have seen in a very long time. What is your name? Cassie, she whispered. Cassie, he repeated. My family is hosting a charity gala for children's arts programs next month. I would be deeply honored if you would attend as my guest of honor. He then added, and we will, of course, be making a substantial donation in your name to the charity of your choice. Cassie was speechless. She could only nod, a wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Mr. Montgomery gave his son one last look of withering contempt. The show was over. Cassie walked out into the cool night air, leaving the $10,000 scattered on the floor behind a humbled, humiliated, and utterly defeated Preston Montgomery III. CTA. She didn't know it yet, but her life had just changed forever. Walking away from that money was the most powerful step she had ever taken. What she did next would not only secure her sister's future, but build a new one for herself, on her own terms. If this story reminds you that true worth is never determined by a price tag, please subscribe for more stories that inspire. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done? Would you have taken the money? Conclusion. The story of Cassie and Preston didn't end on the ballroom floor. Video of her dance, captured on a dozen smartphones, went viral overnight. Offers poured in, from dance companies, talk shows, and choreographers who saw a woman with a powerful story. True to his word, Mr. Montgomery made a massive donation to the Foundation for Maya's rare condition, funding the experimental therapy program for years to come. With the help of a pro bono lawyer who saw the video, Cassie established her own nonprofit dance program for children with disabilities, a place where kids like Maya could experience the joy of movement. She named it the Maya Stage. Preston Montgomery III disappeared from the public eye. The incident became a cautionary tale in elite circles about the dangers of arrogance. He was forced by his father to take a leave of absence and engage in months of quiet community service. Some say it was a harsh lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. Cassie never saw him again. She was too busy building a life founded not on money, but on the unshakable ground of self-respect. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the loudest truths come from the quietest people, and that real strength isn't about the power you wield over others, but the grace you discover within yourself.